I bought some very nice pedigree dogs. And I named them Penny and Gemma. Very nice. And as I was raising them, I would train them not to go out of the gate. And you know, you train them by reward and sometimes by punishment, but mostly by reward. So I would train them not to go out of the gate. But one day somebody was doing some works and he forgot to close the gate and it was left ajar. And I can imagine my dog was thinking, hey, sasa juu tumekaziwa hii maisha na sasa tunaona opportunity, si tutoke. So one of them, the Gemma, the golden retriever, decided to step out and stepped out. Na kuna mtu alikuwa anafanya kazi huko nje, alikuwa anatengeneza some mjengo. And he was had a wheelbarrow carrying 2 bags of cement. The next thing nilisikia ni kilio. Kumbe the dog had been run over by a wheelbarrow carrying 2 bags of cement, 100 kg. Because it did not understand the function of the wall. It's to keep the bad things out and the good things in. And after it had a serious injury, fracture. Nikaipeleka mpaka hospitali. Ikafanyiwa surgery. Vile ipeleka wanyama hospitali wanafanyiwa surgery. Ikafanyiwa surgery and it recovered. But after that, whenever the gate was left open, huyo mbwa alikuwa anafika hapo, anakumbuka memory ya the last time they never went out. Because that's the function of a wall, to keep good things in and bad things out. However, while the structural integrity of the perimeter wall is important, but the security of the compound will be dependent upon the integrity of the who? We are talking about leadership and governance in risk management. Being a trusty watchman. That the security of the compound will be dependent upon the integrity of the watchman. It is better to have a weak wall with a strong watchman than to have a strong wall with a weak watchman. Simuliona hii kesi ilikuwa kwa koti. Jamaa alikuwa Joey. Remember Joey? The Monica Kimani's murder case? And Joey was the suspect?
Yes.
Do you know where Monica lived? It's a very secure area of upmarket Nairobi. It was a home that had a perimeter wall. And not just a perimeter wall. There was a watchman at the gate. But somehow, Joey came, according to the information from the courts, Joey came with a different identity card and gave the watchman. And the watchman aliandika, lakini hakuangalia sura to verify kama ile iko kwa ID na yenye naona hapa is the same. Turned out that was a different ID taken somewhere in Nyayo Estate that was brought there. And in spite of the compound having walls, an enemy entered and committed a heinous act because there was, the watchman was what?
Weak.
Was weak. The greatest risks that SACCOs face are not risks from outside. They are mostly from inside. And governance structures are only as strong as the people overseeing them. Governance structures are only as strong as the people overseeing them. There's a wall here. It's the Great Wall of China. So mnajua mambo ya Great Wall of China. Sorry, I have to apologize to the camera person because I rarely stand on one point.
Okay.
So you don't have to reflect. You'll have to make account of what you have paid.
Yeah.
So, in the Great Wall of China was built over a period of 1700 years. And over 1 million people died building the wall. And why were they building the wall? If I may ask. Do you know why? Do you know why? It's not a rhetorical question. Do you know why they were building the wall?
Yes.
Why were they building the wall?
What of any innovation?
Yes! Because they had been attacked so many times by their enemies, they decided our only solution is to build a wall so high and so thick, no one can climb over it and no one can break through it. And over 1,700 years, the Qing dynasty built a wall that is about 8,800 kilometers. That is like traveling by road from Nairobi to Johannesburg and back. That is how long the wall is. There are rumors that it is one of the only things that can be seen with naked eye from space. And they sat back to enjoy security behind these gigantic walls which they had diligently built. But over the next 100 years, they were attacked 3 times by the same enemies. How? No one ever climbed over the walls. No one ever broke through the walls. How then did they get into ancient China? They got into China straight through the gates. How? They bribed the watchmen. While they were busy building walls, they forgot to teach integrity to their children so that among them they can raise trusty watchmen. And that became their Achilles heel. They had strong walls but weak watchmen. And I have said it is better to have a weak wall and a strong watchman than to have a strong wall and a weak watchman. For the compound is only as safe as the strength of the watchman. And nearly all security breaches of a quote-unquote world community are an inside job. An inside job is a crime committed by a person in a position of trust or with the help of someone either employed by the victim or entrusted with access to the victim's affairs or premises. It is always an inside job. So our call here is to be what? Trusty watchmen. The greatest risk mitigation strategy is to have trusted men and women handling your affairs. That is the biggest risk mitigation strategy. Without that, the rest may not matter. The rest may not matter. Have you read of the history of the Trojan War?
Yes.
Unajua history ya Trojan War?
And the Trojan horse.
And the Trojan horse. The War of Troy. Now, Troy was a kingdom that was fortified with walls. But it was when the emperor was having a child, there was a child called Paris. And it was prophesied that this child will cause anarchy to the kingdom. And the king was instructed, you have to kill this your child. So the mother gave some people the child to go and kill. But one of the people entrusted with killing that child did not do the job. He said, I cannot shed the blood of an innocent child. So he went and raised Paris. And somehow, finally, Paris found his way back into the city, a fully grown royal blood. But somehow along the way, he went to Sparta, yet another kingdom, and decided to take the wife of the king of Sparta. And for that reason, the Spartan king mobilized all the other kings in the great Greek. And they said, we are going to attack Troy for this great abuse that we have suffered. So they decided they will attack Troy. And for 10 years they tried, unsuccessfully, because Troy had great, amazing fortress and walls. So finally, they said, we have given up. And as a sign of their giving up, they left a very big horse. It was wooden horse. As a sign of their surrender. And they made their way away from the city of Troy. So the Trojans woke up one morning and they realized, wait a minute, our enemies have gone. So as a sign of victory, to celebrate their victory, they went and picked the horse and they drove it into Troy, the city of Troy, inside the walls. Little did they know that inside the horse were soldiers, were Greek soldiers who were just waiting. So in the pitch of darkness, as the people were celebrating, they opened the horse from the inside and they got out. And they opened the gates of Troy. And that's how Troy fell. The enemy came from inside. It was not from, they brought it inside. And the enemy destroyed from within. And that's how Troy lost. And for those of you who understand cybersecurity, you know viruses. One of them is called Trojan horse. To destroy from within. And for the sake of our bishop, this is Jesus. Even Jesus was betrayed by a person who was close enough to him to allow him to kiss him. You don't just allow anyone to... You know, being kissed is a very intimate affair. You don't just allow any stranger. In fact, if you're walking around and a stranger comes and tries to kiss you, you will be very offended. So this means it was a very close person. And that was a risk from within. And there's an African proverb that says, if there is no enemy within, the enemy without can do us no harm. That's why we are talking about being a trusty watchman. Do you know what the greatest risk to the Sacco is? The men and women seated in here. We are the greatest risk. There are many other risks. But we pose the greatest risks. And that's why we must learn how to be a trusty watchman. There is something I conjured up here. I call it the risk management wall. We are talking about the wall and the watchman. The risk management wall. And I believe looking at the catalog of speakers that you have, you will delve deeply into these layers. And on this wall, there is layer 1. I call it the operational level. These are the people who the risk is associated with, or the department. The person overseeing that, they are the risk owners. They are people who experience this risk. And they decide how to respond to the risk. That is layer number 1. Layer number 2, because even these people who have the risk have their own biases. For example, someone might come to get a loan, and that person is a defaulter. And you know he's a defaulter, but he's your friend. And you might the things for them to get the loan because of your personal bias. To ensure that does not happen, we have a second layer. I call it the control level. This is why we have the risk department. The risk department is essentially responsible for creating standards and procedures to ensure uniformity of how we respond to the risks. That is layer number 2. Then we have layer number 3, the assurance. That is the audit, either internal or external. Who just comes to ensure that the standards set by the control department are being adhered to. But above that wall is a watchman at the top. Who is there? The board, the directors, and the leadership of the organization. They are the watchmen to ensure that this wall is actually functioning. And therefore, the strength and the quality of this wall will be dependent upon the quality and the people at the top. So this morning, I will just share about 3 qualities that will help us to be trusty watchmen. Some of these things you already know, but we have said we keep learning and relearning. We keep learning and relearning. Being a trusty watchman. No, by the way, you realize you have interacted quite extensively when you start knowing people by the Chris. Yeah, I was trying to keep up. But I realized that your capacity is a bit high. Yeah, unajua nilikuja na bibi bwana. Kuja na bibi alafu unakimbizwa hivyo. na capacity imekuwa mingi. So I made sure I drove in the middle of the road. You could not overtake. That was me. And then Mungu ni nani? Ng'ombe zikaingia kwa barabara. Zikakufungia. Mimi nikapata head start. Ukanipata hapa. Yeah, so that is life. Being a trusty watchman. Because we said the usefulness of a wall is to the extent of the integrity of the watchman. It is better to have a weak wall and a trusted watchman than have a strong wall with a weak, compromisable watchman. So being a trusty watchman. I know many of you were alive when we had the big scandal of Enron. Remember Enron? The Enron scandal? Dubbed as one of the biggest scandal in corporate history. It turns out Enron was in the energy sector in the US, a big corporate, worth about $60 billion. Now, just to show you how big that is, Safaricom is worth about $6 billion. Yet is dubbed the biggest company in sub-Saharan Africa. This was 10 times bigger than Safaricom in 2001. Not a big corporation. But turns out, but their share price had hit an all-time high of $90.75. But then, it emerged that these people had been inflating their books, being chaperoned by the directors. They were aware it was happening, but they looked the other way. Finally, the scandal was exposed. And the share price for Enron plummeted to an all-time low of $0.27. And they eventually filed for bankruptcy. Who do we blame for their downfall? The who? The watchman. As if that was not enough. In the recent past, in 2015, Volkswagen, there was a scandal involving Volkswagen. What did they do? You see, there are certain levels of emissions that cannot be permitted in the United States. Volkswagen is a German car maker. So for them, they had a software that they developed, chaperoned by the board from the highest decision-making organ of the organization. They oversaw a software that was made, that was installed in the cars, so whenever they detect when they are doing a trial to see the emission, and then it will show that the emission is just fine. But when the car finally gets to the road, the emissions were 40 times higher than acceptable levels. But the watchmen allowed it to happen. As a matter of fact, they chaperoned it and watched it happen. Finally, they were discovered. Kwa sababu Mswahili alisema, njia ya mwongo ni fupi. They were discovered. And for the first time in 2015, they made a loss. And they suffered $19 billion as fines. And you never know how much more they lost, because individuals could as well file lawsuits. They had a great organization, a great product, but compromisable watchmen. And for that reason, an entire organization was at risk. And that's why I'm saying our greatest risk is us who lead these organizations. And we have seen, even in our Sacco movement, we are all over in the news in the recent past. We are not spared either. Tumeona hiyo? Mambo inaendelea kwa hii dunia yetu na Sacco movement. Why? Somebody somewhere, a trusted watchman, failed to do the job well. And the end result is a risk. Now, suppose you are choosing a watchman. Suppose you are choosing a watchman. There's a gentleman there. I don't know if you can see them. Can you unaona hata kama ni silhouette of a very well built gentleman. Hiyo si yangu clearly. It's not mine. Sijafika hapo. But there's a very serious well built watchman. And then there's Chris Mureithi here. If you are choosing a watchman of the two, who will you choose? This guy here? Eh? Unaona huyu? Mtu amekula chuma kabisa. Eh? Sinamna hiyo? Lakini nasikianga muscle and money don't go together. Sijui dikia mbona umesikia hiyo?
Sijasikia.
Because to gain that muscle you must be very idle. To manage all that time to go to the gym. And money and idleness don't work together. So such type of muscle ngumu kupata ukiwa na pesa. But if you are choosing a watchman, of the two, who would you choose? The former, right? Because most of us, we are focused a lot on competence and less on character. There's this first person here that you saw, the one you would choose. That is a man who was called Samson. You know Samson? Very strong. Yeah, by the way, that guy was very strong. Strong and idle. Because at the time it is said that he heard that the enemy is waiting for him outside. Akafanya nini? He could have escaped through the back route. But he decided, no, I have time and strength. He decided to uproot the gate. Sijui kama mnanielewa. He could have ran through the back door. But he chose, he will uproot the gate and carried it to a mountain. Wenye wanamngoja wamfuate na gate, hata wewe ukiona mtu amemwa hivyo utamfuata. He carried it. Akaipeleka juu ya mlima. Because he was strong and idle. Another time he went somewhere, akakasirishwa na watu. Alijua amenyimwa vitu mbili tatu. He went and caught 300 foxes. That is a very idle man. The Englishman says as cunning as a fox. But he had the time to capture 300 of them, not one. One was already exploit good enough. But he chose no, one is not enough, 300. If that's not all, he came and tied their tails together. That's a very idle and strong man. As if that was not enough, he put them on fire. And he set them into wheat fields. That is your watchman that you have chosen. Very competent. But he was full of compromise. The same things, the risk he was told, hey, avoid this one. He had a very high appetite for risk. But when you have a very high appetite for risk, you better as well also be a very, very intelligent. Because I remember a time this fellow was tied down. And akaambiwa, hey, Philistines are upon us. Anaamuka anasema wako wapi? He shakes himself off. Anaambiwa ulinidanganya. Hiyo sio nguvu yako. Analala tena. Anaambiwa, hey, 3 times. Na yeye hangaona hapa kuna shida. But every time he sleeps is when the Palestinians come. That's a foolish man. So he was full of muscle but weak of character. And the end result is that he ended up being bald-headed, amenyolewa, ametolewa macho, and he died without realizing his vision. But then there was this man who you despised here, that you cannot be a watchman. And it's the man that our in-house bishop mentioned, Joseph. Joseph was trusted by, even in a foreign land, he was trusted by the owner of the house, Potiphar, with everything. And that house multiplied. And one time when the wife came and she also wanted more work, you know, when a job description, a job description, you describe, then down there, unaeka, and any other. So I think Potiphar's wife was invoking that clause of any other. But Joseph was a trusty watchman. And he said, no. I have been allowed access to everything else in this house. Except you. That's a watchman. He may not have the physical build of Samson, but he had the character of a trusty watchman. We focus too much on competence, but we forget character. And you see, this is Warren Buffett, one of the wealthiest men on this God-green planet. And he said, in looking for people to hire, you look for 3 qualities: integrity, intelligence, and energy. If they don't have the first, do not bother with the other 2. If they don't have integrity, intelligence, and energy, will not matter. And 99% of all leadership failures are failures of character. Yet, we tend to focus too much time on competence and not nearly enough on character. And that's why compromise has even become policy in different places. And leadership is a blend of competence and character. But if you must be without one, be without competence. Be without competence. If you must be without one, I encourage you to have both. And there's a writer here who wrote a very nice statement that I have kept in my house. I read it every day I wake up in the morning. That the greatest want of the world is the want of men. Men who will not be bought or sold. Men who in their inmost souls are true and honest. Men who do not fear to call sin by its right name. Men whose conscience is as true to duty as a needle to the pole. Men who will stand for the right, though the heavens fall. For those of you who come from where I come from, like my good friend Dixon here, he knows I want to be a member of parliament for that particular area. And the first thing I ask myself, will I be this type of a man? Who will stand for the right, though the heavens fall? If I intend to be a trusty watchman for that great constituency, do I have the quality to stand for the right, though the heavens fall? That's a question we must ask ourselves. So the first thing for us to be trusty watchmen, we must model integrity. We must model integrity. Si namna hiyo? Sio iko nyumbani imefika? Imeeleweka? Imeeleweka ama imeelewesha? Imeeleweka. Very nice. So we must model integrity. And I'm reminded of this gentleman called Billy Graham. Billy Graham was somewhere in California having a crusade. And he tried to use the post office. Akaenda kutafuta post office. Ametafuta party. Finally he found a young man and he asked the young man, which way is the post office? And the young man told him, go down, take a right, about 100 blocks, you will find the post office. And being very happy, he told the young man, thank you for your assistance, and I would wish to invite you to a crusade I'm running downtown so that I can show you the way to heaven. Would you mind coming? And the young man said, I'm not interested, sir. With all due respect. Taken aback, Billy Graham, being a celebrated preacher, was shocked and asked him, why wouldn't you want to come to be shown the way to heaven? And he told him, sir, with the respect that is due to you, how can you show me the way to heaven if you cannot find your way to the post office? What are the chances that you show me the way to heaven? You see, we must model that which we want to see. Even at home, we must model for our children that which we want to see. Because here is the reality. Children replicate the character of their parents with terrible exactness. Terrible what? Exactness. It is when I understood that I finally understood my father. Because my father was your typical African disciplinarian. Sisi tulikuwa tunanyoroshwa. Tunanyoroshwa. Sawa sawa. Tunanyoroshwa sawa. Mnajua ama nyinyi mnanyoroshana? Tunanyoroshwa sawa sawa. My father used to even beat us in advance. Somebody is traveling, he calls us, we order to lie down. We are thoroughly beaten. We ask, what have we done? He says nothing, but I know when I am gone, you will do things. So I'm just doing my job in advance. He was very proactive. Thoroughly beaten. In fact, in my opinion, I think my entire life, my father only beat me twice. The rest of the time, he was simply trying to kill me. It is when I understood that children replicate their parents' character with terrible exactness that finally understood my father. He was beating me like that because he saw the worst of himself in me. So he was exercising a genetical demon with kiboko. Sisi hata tukiwa watoto tukifunza, unajua Wakristo, when your children are growing, the first thing you teach them is John 3:16. For God so loved the world, and he gave God. Sisi kabla tufika huko tulikuwa Proverbs 22. Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, and only the rod of correction will drive it far away from him. Before I knew John 3:16, hiyo nilikuwa najua. Na tulioneshwa maneno. Because finally understood, because children replicate the character of their parents with terrible exactness. Mchungaji, you know the story of Abraham. He went somewhere and lied and said, my wife is my sister. Enda kwa Isaac. Alifanya nini? He repeated the exact same lie. And it only gets worse with generations. Because in the Isaac's generation, mwingine akuja akamdanganya akamwambia mimi ndio firstborn. Sasa hiyo alikuwa ameweka ngozi ya kondoo. Ndio sikiji yako na manyoya. Jacob. But that only got worse because now Jacob's children sold one of their own. And they lied to their father that he has died. The lie keeps getting worse. When we talk about integrity, we must model integrity. When I went to the constituency and I tell them, I want to give you different leadership, I have to show them different leadership. That's why I'm not waiting for 2027. Oh, niandi kuambia sasa, tupangane hapa, nijui nini, sijui hapana. I identified a problem in the constituency, a health problem. And Dicky can bear you witness. I have been taking medical camps to address these health problems since the year 2022 December. I have seen about 15,000 patients so far to model what I am capable of. So that when I come, sikuji kuambia nini? Stories ajabu. We must model integrity. We cannot be like Billy Graham, trying to show people to heaven, yet you cannot find your way to the post office. And leadership is not like the business of a travel agent. So you know, I tried to meet a travel agent who disappointed you. Because I have. In 2015, I went to Dubai. We used a travel agent. Hey, look at my nyumba. Hey, unaona hii ni 5-star. Unajua Dubai hata hapa na 8-star. You know that there's a hotel called Burj Al Arab. Si nyinyi mumeenda huko? That is gold coated on the inside. Unatembea kwa gold. So huko ukienda waambia mtu okoka uende Miguli because in Miguli we shall be walking on streets of gold. Nakwambia hiyo Miguli unasema nishapita bana, nishafika. So we had been showed very nice hotel. Wacha tufika huko. Tukapelekwa wengine ilikuwa sijui what boutique. Tukaingia kwa room ilikuwa it was damp. It's like those who are there was just smoking shisha. It was smelling bad. Tukapigia watu tukasema, I thought you showed us 5-star hotel. Kumwambia we are very sorry. Hata sisi tulitumia internet. We just googled the photos because we have not been there ourselves. They were taking us to places they have never been. Now that is not leadership. Leadership is not the business of a travel agency. It is a business of a tour guide who knows the way, shows the way, and goes the way. For us to be trusty watchmen, we must model integrity. And what is integrity? Integrity is commitment to a set of values without wavering. Commitment to a set of values without wavering. It is the character to do what is right even when no one is watching. That is what integrity is about. And recently I heard this, our Nairobi senator say something. I found it quite so profound. He said, if you cannot stand by your values when they are tested, then those are just hobbies. Wangapi wako na, you have irreducible minimums, that things that you cannot stoop below. Hakuna? By a show of hands, anybody who has some irreducible minimum? Okay, by a show of hands, who, anything for you goes? Anybody? And how many not raise their hands no matter what I ask? If you cannot stand by your values when they are tested, then those are just what? Hobbies. Don't say, oh, I have. And by the way, you know, we are very eloquent when we articulate what we stand for. But the question is, what do you stand on? What you stand for pales in comparison, as far as the importance is concerned, to what you stand on. Many people are very eloquent about what they stand for. But it's the values that you stand on that keep you grounded. You have some irreducible minimum. You can be like Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, who said, "O king, we do not want to discuss this matter. Our God that we serve is well capable of saving us." But here's where values are tested. The next part, he says, "But if not, we will still not bow." And here's the thing, they had been promised that when you bow, you will not burn. But if you notice, those who are throwing them into the fire, who are willing to bow, they are the ones who got burnt. Whenever you bow, you burn. So by all means, we must model integrity. Number 2, we must institutionalize transparency in our SACCOs. We must institutionalize transparency in our SACCOs. We're just talking about being a trusty watchman. We must institutionalize transparency in our SACCO. I believe you know this man who has just unfortunately left us. The former IBC chairman, Wafula Chebukati. In the last election, things went very well. We were going very well, very well, very well. But at the tail end of it, as the announcement was about to be made, there was some disquiet in the commission. Some are saying we are ready with the results, and others are saying we cannot take responsibility for the results. And what were they saying? They said, who remembers the statement? You know the good thing about SACCOs and you are quasi-politicians. See, you campaign for those who are board members. I know there are CEOs here, but also there are board members. You campaign. Si ni ukweli? Bwana Diki. Unasimamanga unaambia, mimi mkinichagua hii asubuhi mkiamka dividend 18%. Si namna hiyo? Ndio hiyo. Unaambia namna hiyo? Yeah? Some of you promise, others overpromise. So for that reason, you are quasi-politicians. So you understand national matters. So one group said, we are ready with the results. The other group said, we will not take responsibility. Why? Who remembers? There's a very popular word that was used. Because, and Charera said, the process was very good until the last phase. Because it was opaque. There was opaqueness. Mnakumbuka hiyo opaqueness?
Yes.
Is it opaqueness or opacity?
Something.
Something like that, isn't it?
Yes.
That there was opaqueness. at the tail end of, in other words, she was saying, at the end, they lacked transparency. I mean, if I was asked my opinion, I should suggest that whatever that boardroom is happening, kukuwe na CCTV. Just as we are seeing the results, why are they being relayed? Why are they then being moderated in private? I think it's here for CCTV. Ndio kila mtu. So when you come to say, oh, I was threatened, there is evidence, or otherwise. So the biggest problem that almost marred an otherwise well-run election is because there was some lack of transparency in as far as those who are in the commission were concerned. We have also seen in the runnings of our government, the government has faced a few hurdles. One of them is the proposed takeover of JKIA. For many of us who I know we are regular flyers, we agree that place needs to be improved. We are the hub of East Africa. Honestly, we need to improve it. So there is nothing wrong with the idea of improving the airport. Where did the challenge come in? A lack of what? Opaqueness. Because all of a sudden we had, oh, Adani has been awarded the what? The deal. You see, many of you will end up becoming presidents someday. Let me educate you while you still can. On matters of a vision. When people don't understand the vision you are casting, they will reject it. Tuko pamoja? People reject what they don't understand. So the first thing when you're casting a vision or you're trying to give people a new strategic direction, do what? Inform them. For what they don't know, they will reject. It is not out of the merit of the vision, it's out of the ignorance of the people. And it is your responsibility to teach them. So this one faced a few hurdles because there was a lack of transparency, and has been the case with many other things. And the end result is that we have, because of a lack of transparency. Do you remember during the election, one of the things that used to be asked for is a contract for expressway. Mnakumbuka? Has it ever been seen? Why would you transact a national, you see, these are taxpayers' money, without the people knowing even the details of the contract? It means there are risks in there that we are not aware of. And that's why we will say, no. And then, I could see a very frustrated president. I understand where he's coming from. And he has often said that he wants to do what is right, not what is popular. And that is a very good mentality for a leader. And I want you to adopt that mentality. Doing what is right, not that which is popular. The only thing we have missed is that bit of transparency. Everything is shrouded in mystery. You don't know how this was awarded to that. And then the end result is that the president said the Kenyans have there's a spirit of rejection that is hovering over Kenyans. It is not a spirit. It's just Kenyans don't understand what's going on. And what they don't understand, they will reject. So in similar fashion, we must make it a point to institutionalize transparency in the things that we do. So we must institutionalize transparency. We must do things openly. Ndio ukisema wewe ni mweupe kama pamba, watu wanafanya nini? Wanakubali. Last but not least, we must prioritize long-term sustainability over short-term gains. We're talking about our role as leaders in managing risks. We must prioritize long-term sustainability over short-term gains. We cannot be like Esu. Is Isu, depending on the school you went to. Allah has call him Esau. Sawa, kuna Esau na kuna issue. If your school was a polling station, then a SACCO is fine. But if you manage to go to group of schools, ISO. But whichever you say, we will understand. It is said like Esau, Esau, sold his birthright for a morsel of bread. We cannot be like Esau. He prioritized short-term satisfaction over long-term sustainability. And we have seen this trend even in SACCOs. We overpromise dividends. In fact, the government is warning that government wants SACCOs against paying out dividends while indebted. Who gonna dare lakini bado you are insisting on paying dividends? In fact, it has gotten worse that some SACCOs are taking bank loans to pay dividends to their members. That is a risk. Taking a loan to pay dividends to your members. Why? Because you are focusing on short-term wins rather than long-term sustainability. We must ask ourselves, the land which we have been given, which is a SACCO, shall our children find the land? What will our legacy be? Will you be the board member under whose watch the SACCO collapsed? And will forever carry that tag that this is a fellow under whose watch our beloved SACCO collapsed? Because you prioritized short-term gains, because you promised very high dividends, that's why they voted you in, only for the SACCO to collapse. We must prioritize long-term sustainability over short-term wins. And SACCO leadership must suppress risk appetite that prioritizes short-term gains at the expense of long-term sustainability. We determine how much risk appetite the organization must have, depending on our strategic direction. And as we do so, we must suppress risk appetite that prioritizes short-term gains over long-term sustainability. And a wise man said, don't let the pressure of those eating their harvest make you eat your seeds. Tuko pamoja? Ukiona hapo TAWA SACCO amepeana dividend inatoshana hivi, na unasema unaona vile TAWA SACCO amefanya? Sasa sisi we must surpass them. Tuko pamoja? We must do what? We must surpass them. Unasahau ya kwamba TAWA SACCO ni kama ile gari ya Chris Park. Iko na capacity nini? Kubwa. Na wewe uko na ya mkulima mdogo. If you try to keep up with that, hapo bahati mbaya upatane na ka pothole. My friend, you will end up somewhere that you do not like. So don't let the pressure of those eating their harvest to make you eat your seed. TAWA SACCO labda wanakula nini? And I'm using TAWA SACCO just as an example for the sake of illustration. They are probably eating their harvest. It means they planted their seeds long time ago. Maybe you are in that stage where you are now planting your seeds, but you want to eat the same seed. Kesho, ukikula, si hata ukivuna kwa shamba, ukiuza kama ni viazi uza zote, unabakishana gunia kama 2-3. Ndio tumike kama seeds. Ukiuza zote, kesho utapanda nini? We must prioritize long-term sustainability over short-term gains. And if we do those things, we shall be indeed a trusty watchman.